Imagine yourself standing in the middle of a library surrounded by millions of books. They all have different sizes, different colors, and different shapes. Now, what if these books are filled with the stories of every possible life you could have lived? Would you want to read them? In The Midnight Library by Haig, Nora Seed gets to do just that, exploring alternate realities from marrying her ex to becoming an Olympic swimmer. She finds that every choice comes with its own set of challenges. The question is, does she discover a life that makes her truly happy? Well, let's see. Nora Seed was having a rough day. One of those days where everything seemed to fall apart. At 35, she sat in her small room, scrolling through social media, getting lost in snapshots of other people's perfect lives. Then there was a knock on her door. It was Ash, a guy she once turned down for a date. For a short moment, there was a flicker of hope. Maybe he was there to ask her out again. But as she opened the door, she quickly learned that wasn't the case. He had come to deliver heartbreaking news. Her beloved cat, Voltaire, had been found lifeless in the street, and things only got worse from there. The next day, completely unraveled, Nora lost her job and bumped into old friends who clearly still held bitterness over past choices she made. She even found out that her brother Joe had been in town but didn't even bother to reach out to her. She tried texting her best friend, Izzy, hoping for some comfort, but there was no response. Then came another blow. Her piano student's mother called to cancel future lessons. Even her elderly neighbor told her she no longer needed to pick up his medication. It felt like every connection she had was slipping away one by one. By the end of the day, she was convinced that the world would be better off without her. She wrote a note and decided she'd had enough. But instead of darkness, she woke up in a strange place. A massive library that seemed to stretch on forever. Standing there, surrounded by rows and rows of books, she spotted a familiar face. Mrs. Elm, her school librarian from years ago. With a calm voice, Mrs. Elm explained that Nora was in a place between life and death. A space filled with infinite books, each one containing a different version of her life. Every choice, every path not taken was right there on the shelves. And now she had the chance to explore them, to find a life where she might feel at peace. Thus began her journey. Flipping through the lives she never lived, all in a search of a version of herself that could make her feel whole. Nora stood in the midnight library, overwhelmed by the endless shelves filled with books. Mrs. Elm handed her the first book, telling her that this was her chance to explore lives where things had gone differently. Her heart pounded with both fear and curiosity as she opened the first book and found herself in an alternate version of her life. In this new life, she had married Dan, the man she had once been engaged to. They were living the dream they had once talked about, running a cozy country pub together. For a moment, she felt like she had stepped into the perfect scenario. Then reality sank in. The pub was struggling financially, and Dan was distant and moody, a far cry from the supportive partner she had hoped for. It turned out that this life wasn't what she had imagined. She felt out of place, like a stranger in her own skin. In that moment of realization, the scene faded and she was back in the midnight library. Mrs. Elm looked at her knowingly. She explained that it was impossible to predict how a different choice would truly shape a life. Nora couldn't help but feel even more confused. Would any of these lives be the one she was searching for? She decided to try again. This time she picked a life where she had kept Voltaire, her cat, indoors. She found herself calling out for him, only to discover his lifeless body under the bed. It was shocking. Keeping him inside did not change the outcome. Mrs. Elm later revealed that Voltaire had a severe heart problem, something Nora couldn't have controlled. This experience lifted some of the guilt she had been carrying, showing her that not everything was within her power to change. Next, she entered a life where she had moved to Australia with her best friend Izzy. Nora had imagined that a new start would have brought them closer together, but soon after arriving in this life, she learned that Izzy had died in a car accident. The grief hit her hard, and before she knew it, she was back in the library again. It was another harsh lesson. Decisions could lead to unexpected outcomes, and no life was free from sorrow. Feeling disheartened, she chose to dive into another possibility. In this life, she was an Olympic swimmer. Her childhood talent had been nurtured into a dazzling career. She had everything she had once dreamed of: fame, trophies, and a close relationship with her brother Joe, who was now her manager. Yet despite all the success, she still felt that familiar emptiness. She even experienced mental health struggles in this life, something she hadn't anticipated. It struck her that even a life of glory had its shadows. As she gave a public speech about her journey, she found herself speaking from the heart, telling the audience that success wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. With that, the scene blurred, and she was back in the library. The shelves around her seemed endless, each book a reminder of the countless possibilities still unexplored. Nora stood there, holding the weight of what she had just learned. Every life had its own challenges, its own unpredictable twists, and none were as simple as they first appeared. She then found herself in yet another life, but this time something different happened. This time she was living a life of adventure as a glaciologist. She woke up on a research ship, staring out at the vast, icy landscape filled with glaciers. For the first time, she felt a thrill. This was the life of true exploration and excitement she had always dreamed of. That feeling didn't last long, though. During an expedition, she came face to face with a polar bear. It was a terrifying moment, and she froze. Staring into the bear's eyes, she felt a fear, realizing how close she was to death. Oddly enough, that fear awakened something inside her. She wanted to live. She wasn't ready to let go. Just as suddenly as the encounter began, the polar bear turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, heart racing. When she finally returned to the ship, she found herself back in the midnight library. Breathless and shaken, she looked at Mrs. Elm. The librarian seemed to understand what had just happened without saying a word. Nora realized that this experience had changed her. For the first time since entering the library, she felt a spark of desire to live, to find a life she could truly embrace. Before she could dwell too much on it, Mrs. Elm guided her to another book, leading her into another possible life. In this next life, she met Hugo, a fellow researcher who surprised her with an unexpected revelation. He too was exploring alternate lives. However, he didn't experience a library like she did. His journey involved a video store, guided by his uncle. He explained how every person has their own version of this in-between place. They talked long into the night, and while it was comforting to know she wasn't alone in this strange experience, it also left her with more questions. Hugo seemed to be wandering through lives without ever finding one to settle in. He drifted through each possibility like a traveler passing through towns, always wondering what might be waiting in the next one. This made her reflect on her journey and what she was truly seeking. Soon after, she found herself living a life where her band, the Labyrinths, had made it big. She was on stage, playing to a packed stadium in Brazil. The lights, the energy of the crowd, it was all exhilarating. Ravi was there, but Joe, her brother, was noticeably absent. During an interview backstage, she learned the heartbreaking truth. Joe had passed away 2 years ago due to an overdose. A wave of sorrow washed over her, and before she could process it fully, she was pulled back into the Midnight Library. Nora stood there trying to make sense of it all. Each life brought its own set of unexpected realities, showing her that every choice carried weight and consequences she could never have anticipated. Whether it was facing danger in the icy wilderness or the highs and lows of fame, these experiences pushed her to question what she truly wanted. The lives she was exploring weren't giving her the clarity she had hoped for. Yet with each new journey, she felt herself changing, growing, and realizing that some things could not be controlled, no matter how carefully she chose her path. She now reached a point where everything started feeling too heavy. Nora was tired of being disappointed by the lives she was exploring. She turned to Mrs. Elm, hoping for an easy way out, but the librarian reminded her of something important. When Nora used to play chess back in school, she would often lose hope after a few bad moves. Yet in chess, even the smallest piece could become a queen if given the chance. Mrs. Elm encouraged her to keep going. So, with a sense of determination, Nora agreed to try more lives, but this time with smaller changes. In the next life, she found herself working at an animal shelter alongside a kind-hearted boyfriend. It seemed peaceful, a life where every day was filled with the warmth of caring for animals. She learned they had known each other since school and were even planning to move in together. For a moment, it felt like this life might be the right one. But as days passed, she realized it wasn't what she was searching for. It was kind and fulfilling in its own way, yet she felt like this life belonged to someone else. Moving on, she stepped into a life where she owned a vineyard, with a man she had met during her gap year in Mexico. It was a life of contentment. Together they worked the land, laughed, and shared quiet evenings in their beautiful home. Still, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something was missing. The vineyard offered happiness on the surface, but not the deep fulfillment she was longing for. She went on to explore other lives, one after another. In some, she stayed for only a minute, sensing right away that they weren't for her. In others, she lingered for days, trying to piece together what it was about each life that left her unsatisfied. She tried being a novelist, an architect, a travel blogger, a concert pianist, a philosophy lecturer, and even a volunteer in a homeless shelter. Some lives felt adventurous, others cozy, but none of them settled the restlessness inside her. During these experiences, she came to a striking realization. The reason she had attempted to end her life wasn't solely because she was unhappy. It was because she couldn't see a way out of her own despair. She was starting to forget what her true self even looked like amidst all these different versions. She felt lost in the vast sea of possibilities. One night, back in the Midnight Library, she found that the room had grown darker, its shelves looking more endless and daunting. Mrs. Elm explained that it was because Nora herself was a bit lost. She worried that she might be trapped in this space forever. But the librarian reassured her that the books were still there, filled with possibilities waiting to be explored. Life didn't have to be understood, it just had to be lived. With that in mind, Nora picked another life, one that involved a simple decision. Going for coffee with Ash, the man who had knocked on her door with bad news about her cat all those lives ago. It was a small choice, but perhaps it was time to see where it could lead. She was lying in bed next to Ash, the man who had once brought the bad news about her cat. Only this time, things were different. She noticed a ring on her finger, and it quickly became clear they were married. As she crept out of bed, she encountered a little girl in the hallway. The child looked up at her, calling her Mommy. Her heart skipped a beat. She had a daughter. Her name was Molly. Nora comforted Molly through a nightmare, realizing that she was living the life many people dream of: a loving marriage, a child, and a cozy home. It all felt strangely right. Exploring the house further, she learned that she was a professor at Cambridge, on a sabbatical to write a book. On the other hand, Ash was a surgeon. They even had a dog named Pluto. Every detail seemed to fit seamlessly, like a well-crafted story. Days turned into weeks, and she started to think that she might have finally found the life she could stay in. As the days passed, she began to remember things about this life, like fragments of memories she had never actually lived. Despite this growing sense of comfort, there were moments that caught her off guard. She occasionally slipped up, saying things that didn't quite align with this version of herself. And then there was the day she decided to visit Mrs. Elm. To her shock, Mrs. Elm had passed away in this life. This hit Nora hard. Mrs. Elm had been a source of guidance and comfort throughout all her explorations. As she wandered the streets trying to make sense of her feelings, she spotted Leo, her former piano student. He was being arrested. Nora had stopped giving him lessons in this version of her life, and it was clear he had fallen into trouble. It was a sobering moment for her. Despite all the seeming perfection of this life, there were still losses and consequences to her choices. Suddenly, she felt herself fading, as if her place in this perfect world was slipping away. And just like that, she found herself back in the Midnight Library. Standing there, she realized that even this so-called perfect life had cracks. She couldn't escape the reality that life, in any form, had its own set of challenges. No matter how many perfect pieces fell into place, perfection itself was an illusion. This realization brought her a step closer to understanding that it wasn't about finding the right life. It was about learning to live the one she already had. Back in the Midnight Library, Nora was greeted by a shocking sight. The library was on fire. Flames flickered along the shelves, casting shadows that stretched across the room. Mrs. Elm stood by, calm but with an urgency in her eyes. She told Nora that the reason the library was collapsing was simple. Nora had finally decided that she wanted to live. This space between life and death could no longer hold her. But now she needed to act quickly if she wanted to escape. So she rushed to find the book of her original life, the one that would take her back to where it all began. She opened the pages, but they were blank. Panic surged through her. Mrs. Elm handed her a pen, urging her to write something, anything, to bridge her way back. With a trembling hand, she scrawled the words, "I am alive." The room around her spun, the flames roaring louder. Then, just as suddenly as it had all started, she was back in her original body. She woke up in her own bed, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She felt sick and rushed to her neighbor's house for help, barely making it before passing out. When she regained consciousness in the hospital, she found herself surrounded by familiar faces. Joe, her brother, had come to visit. They talked, patching up the strained relationship they had both suffered from for so long. It wasn't easy, but it was real. She also received a message from Izzy saying she was planning to return to the UK. It was as if all the broken pieces were starting to come back together. Not perfectly, but in a way that felt honest and possible. After leaving the hospital, Nora decided to put her energy into building a life she could truly connect with. She put up posters around town, advertising her services as a piano teacher again. Leo's mother called her soon after, saying Leo was eager to resume his lessons. This simple step gave her a sense of purpose, a way to move forward, not as someone else, but as herself. She even made time to visit Mrs. Elm at the retirement home. They played chess together, discussing how the game was filled with endless possibilities. Nora realized that much like chess, life had infinite moves and choices, and that the outcome wasn't about achieving perfection. It was about playing the game, making each choice matter, and living through every moment with intention. And with that newfound clarity, she was finally ready to start her new chapter, one move at a time. So what do you think? If you had the chance to explore different lives based on the choices you've made, would you want to see how things could have turned out? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below and be sure to subscribe.